You can't feel static electricity until it hits about 3,000 volts. You won't even see a spark until about 5,000. So that little zap off a doorknob in the winter, that's thousands of volts, and you barely notice it. Now here's the part that should scare you. A lot of modern electronic components can be killed at 100 volts. Some die well below that. And just walking across a carpet on a dry day can build up over 10,000 volts on your body. Do the math. The thing that destroys these parts is completely invisible to the person holding them. No spark, no shock, no warning. Just a dead chip. Or worse, a chip that seems fine, ships out and dies in the field 3 months later. This is the problem that created an entire category of plastic. Here at Vision Miner, we live in high-temperature engineering polymers, 3D printing, PEEK and Ultimate PEC, and these materials that go into aerospace and defense and semiconductor manufacturing. And a huge slice of that world has one requirement that has nothing to do with strength or heat. It has to control static. So today, where ESD-safe plastics come from and why 3D printing them is quietly changing how electronics get built. The back half is the part that matters most. For most of the 20th century, plastic was the hero of electronics. It was cheap, it was light, it was moldable, and a fantastic electrical insulator. And that last one is key. You want insulation in electronics. It's why your wires have plastic coating instead of being bare copper wire. So plastic went everywhere. Trays, tubes, board holders, fixtures, jigs. The whole factory floor got wrapped in it. And then electronics got smaller. And that exact same property turned into a problem. Because an insulator doesn't just block current from getting in, it also blocks charge from getting out. When two materials touch and then separate, one steals electrons from the other. You've actually felt this your whole life. Socks on the carpet, balloon on your hair, that blanket on a crisp winter morning. On metal, that charge flows away. It finds ground and it's gone. But on a standard plastic, there's nowhere for it to go. The charge just sits there, waiting. It checks in, but it never checks out. So a plastic tray, handled all day, builds up thousands of volts, and it holds that charge until something conductive gets close enough to it. And then, snap, the whole thing dumps at once right into whatever's nearby. And if that's a sensitive microchip, that chip is gone. That's a plastic tray turning into a loaded gun. Early electronics could shrug this off. You had big vacuum tubes, chunky parts, it was pretty tough stuff. But the industry raced to make everything smaller. The transistor in 1947, the integrated circuit in 1958, and it never really stopped. By the time we got to the building blocks of modern chips, the internal layers were so delicate that a voltage spike that a human couldn't even feel could blow a hole straight through them. So here's my favorite example. Early disk drive manufacturers nearly ground to a halt at some companies. The read-write heads, those tiny little parts that read the data on the disks, were actually dying from static faster than they could build them. An entire production line paralyzed by something nobody could even see. And here's the kicker, the part that keeps reliability engineers up at night. Sometimes static doesn't kill the part, it just wounds it. The component still works. It passes every test. It ships inside a product to the customer. And then weeks or months later, out in the field, it fails. That's latent damage. And it's the really expensive kind of damage. Now, it's not just a cheap part on your factory floor. It's now a warranty claim and a recall and your reputation. Industry estimates put the cost of static damage in the billions of dollars per year. And roughly a quarter of all electronic failures with no known cause trace back to static. A quarter from something invisible. Now the fix wasn't one magic material. There are actually 4 kinds of ESD plastic. You can think of them as 4 speed limits for how fast a charge can move. 1, you've got antistatic. It resists building up a charge in the first place. Then you've got static dissipative. That's the sweet spot. The charge bleeds away, but slowly and in a controlled way. Slow enough that it doesn't dump all at once, and fast enough that it doesn't sit there forever. Then you've got conductive. That moves the charge really fast. It's great for getting it to ground quick, but if you move it too fast, you can actually cause a different kind of damage, so faster isn't always better. And then there's shielding, and that's your static bag. Your motherboard or graphics card, it comes in these bags that are kind of shiny, and it wraps the part basically like a tiny Faraday cage. Most of the time, the magic zone you want is the static dissipative. The whole game is engineering a plastic to land exactly in that window. So how do you make a plastic that holds charge and just forever bleeds it off in a controlled way? Carbon black. And here's where it gets interesting. It didn't even start in electronics. It was actually being used widely in the early 1970s to stop fuel systems from building up static and exploding. Then, somebody realized the same trick that keeps a fuel tank from blowing up could actually save a microchip. You basically blend this fine conductive powder into the plastic, and at low amounts, nothing happens. But as you keep adding more, then at one specific point, the particles suddenly link up into a continuous network. And that moment has a name. It's called the percolation threshold. Think of stepping stones across a river. You got one here and one there, and you can't cross. But if you add enough, suddenly there's a pathway all the way across. Once you cross that threshold, your insulating plastic becomes a controlled conductor. And it got better from there. Carbon nanotubes. And these aren't just a marketing term, and they're not just carbon black with a fancier name. It's the same idea, but a nanotube is so long and thin that it forms a network at a fraction of the loading. So you have less filler, and that means you keep more of the plastic's strength. There's even a branch where the plastic conducts on its own with no filler at all. And that one actually won a Nobel Prize in the year 2000 for making a plastic that could do the one thing that plastic was famous for not doing. Okay, so that's the history. Here's why it matters on your own shop floor. For decades, getting an ESD safe part meant one thing. You buy a big block of carbon-filled plastic and you machine it down. And there's actually the hidden problem. When you extrude a giant block, the carbon doesn't always spread evenly. So the static performance can actually vary across the surface of one single part. One corner behaves and the other doesn't. For a part whose entire job is controlling static, that can be a real problem. And you paid for the whole expensive block and then carved most of it into chips on the floor, and this is exactly where 3D printing changes the game. So when you 3D print an ESD-safe part, you build it up layer by layer. Material only where you need it, and you build the static control into a completely custom shape. A board holder matched to one exact circuit board. Every clip and standoff right where the board needs it. A test fixture with ESD-safe contact points built into the geometry. A robotic gripper that picks up a delicate part on an automated line and never zaps it. A wafer handling tray, shaped for one exact wafer. No tooling, no minimum order, no 6-week lead time waiting on a machine shop. You design it today, print it tonight, and use it tomorrow. And if it's not quite right, change the file, print another one. That's the leap that 3D printing brings. ESD protection stops being something that you buy off a shelf in standard shapes, and it becomes something that you engineer into the exact tool that you need. And the material list actually goes all the way up the ladder. At the entry level, you have ESD PLA and PETG for the light duty stuff, and you can step that up to ESD ABS. The best known is actually Stratasys ABS ESD7. To give credit where it's due, that material actually proved this whole concept on the factory floor. But for the serious work, semiconductor lines, aerospace, vacuum chambers, you need the high-temp polymers. ESD Ultim, ESD PEC, and at the top, ESD PEEK. These actually give you static control plus the heat, chemical resistance, and strength that a chip plant demands. And in there, the material can't outgas, it can't shed particles, it can't react with the harsh chemicals that are on the line. ESD PEEK and PEC are some of the only printable materials on Earth that check every one of those boxes at once. And our own 22 IDEX prints these beautifully. With a 500 Celsius hot end, you can extrude just about anything in the heated chamber and the super hot build plate, which means we do a lot of work for semiconductor manufacturers and even wave solder trays. It's pretty awesome. We actually help teams get these materials onto their floor and dial them in, because printing PEEK is just not the same as printing PLA. That's what we do for the last decade. Now, one thing we always tell people is just because a spool says ESD does not mean your printed part automatically lands in the right range. Your print settings actually change it. Layer height, temperature, that's a big one. Print hotter or colder, it affects the ESD properties. The orientation A part can even behave differently along the layers than across them. The tool path makes a difference. So if you're qualifying parts for real production, then you're going to want to test the actual printed part, not just the data sheet. Now, we'd rather tell you that up front than have you find out the expensive way. So that's the story. Plastic conquered electronics because it was the perfect insulator, and then smaller electronics nearly got killed by that exact same property. Now, the fix was engineering plastic that controls static instead of storing it. And now, with 3D printing, that control goes into any shape you can imagine on demand with no tooling at all. The invisible killer has met its match. At VisionMiner, this is what we do. We help teams figure out the materials, the machines, and the processes to fit their application, from the entry-level stuff all the way up to ESD Peak and PEC on our own 22 IDEX and on the Aeon 3D High-Low for the bigger flight-certified type parts. Semiconductor, aerospace, defense, medical, solar, we see it all almost every single day. So head over to visionminer.com, check out the full machine lineup and the polymer catalog. We actually answer the phone right here in America. We're here to help you and your business. So if you get one, you can prove out the ROI and then scale from there without spending $250,000 on your first machine. It's actually less than 1/10 of that. So give us a call, shoot us an email. We help people figure this out every day, and we're here to help you. So thank you for watching. Have a positive rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.